from Coventry. Comrades and friends, thanks very much for turning up at this National Shop Stewards Network fringe meeting. As you'll hear a little later on when other speakers arrive, the prime reason why we've organised today is that regretfully on the main stage behind us there was only apparently room for the 10 largest unions in the country. And just at number 11 was the RMT. And not far behind that is the FPU. In other words, some of the best fighting unions in this country weren't going to get a platform unless we made an attempt here at Speaker's Corner to offer that. Now, over the last few months, I think one thing I've probably noticed more than anything else is the success that the establishment has had in persuading through the media and the main political parties that a overlapping agenda, a consensual message that somehow cuts are inevitable, that we have to take the blame and the pain that our families have to suffer, and that success is being challenged today by hundreds of thousands of people on this demonstration who have a different message. A message that says we do not take responsibility for the cuts and we refuse to shoulder that blame for ourselves and our families. It's not our fault. As somebody has recently said, it isn't that firefighters are putting out too many fires, you know. It isn't that nurses are treating too many patients. It's that bankers and the banking system triggered a crisis that was already bubbling up in the market economy by their gambling and speculation. But they're doing all right out of it now. I don't actually know, because I don't know London very well, which end of Park Lane is One Hyde Park. I think it's possibly that end. But last August, they finished a new housing development at One Hyde Park. 86 flats. The cheapest was £20 million. The dearest, which was sold last August, a few days after George Osborne said, for example, that billions of pounds had to come out of the welfare budget, that housing benefit had to be cut, disability incapacity benefit had to change, that workers in the public sector had to have a wage freeze whilst inflation rages, that those coming up to retirement had to work longer, pay more and get less out of their pension. A few days after he floated those ideas, the penthouse at number 1 Hyde Park with 6 bedrooms was sold for £140 million. Now, what sort of society is it that says to the multimillionaires, you can have a second or third home in the centre of London costing tens of millions, but hundreds of thousands of families on waiting lists up and down the country can't even have one decent home? The building workers, plasterers, plumbers, electricians can't have a job building the homes that we need. The 1 million young people under the age of 24 are consigned to an early scrap heap by unemployment. What sort of society is that? It's one that's past its sell-by date and it's ripe for change. The home bankers that got bailed out by the actions of governments over the past 2 or 3 years are doing very well. Barclays have declared billions of pounds of profit. HSBC has its 200 highest paid market traders no longer resident for employment contract basis in Britain. They're employed by an offshore Dutch subsidiary. The chief executive of HSBC has his pension paid into Jersey, so he doesn't have to pay the real tax on it. But you and me, when we go to work, we have to pay tax through PAYE, pay as you earn. Our tax is straight off us. Did you know in the year to March of last year, according to Richard Murphy from the Tax Justice Network, 500,000 companies in this country in a year disappeared without filing any accounts or paying any tax. Richard Murphy has estimated they evaded £16 billion worth of tax by that disappearing trick. And how is that paid for? By the £16 billion the Tories want to take out of the welfare budget, out of pensions, out of invalidity, incapacity, disability, the benefits that aid working people. That's the sort of society we have to change. Now to finish, I understand that everybody else has commented on this, and I'm hoping I'm getting some of the reports of the press correctly, but I understand there's been trouble in Regent Street this afternoon. There's talk on the TV of the police coming under the hail of light bulbs filled with ammonia. Apparently an attempt has been made to set afire Topshop. Now I can understand the rage of young people looking at long-term unemployment, feeling that society is casting them aside. But I say to the union leaders and the politicians, unless you seriously have a strategy to take on this government and its austerity programme, you're going to consign another generation in this century, like we saw in the 1970s, down the blind alley of terrorism, because that's the beginnings of that road. So we need more than rage. And this is the point I want to finish on. I reckon everybody here in this audience today, if you're working in a local authority, you probably are facing a 15% pay cut over the next 3 years. 2 years of a wage freeze, 1 year of a 1% rise and a 5.5% rate of inflation. If you're coming up to pension, then on the 28th of February in the House of Commons, they made a change to the way which all future pension schemes will be calculated by using the index called the Retail Price Index and changing it to the Consumer Price Index. That makes a difference of almost 1% a year in the stated rate of inflation. If you're 25 years away from retirement, your pension pot when you retire will be a quarter what it otherwise would have been, and you have to survive on that for 20 or 30 years. If you're young and one of the 1 million unemployed, or you're lucky enough to escape into further or higher education, you're now facing a bill of £50,000 to go to university. In other words, battles against cuts in jobs, services, wage freeze and cuts, pension cuts, they're inevitable. Almost whoever you are in this audience today, what we should be hearing from that stage behind me is a strategy to bring together all those different disputes. There's all going to have to be some action. Probably industrial action. Why have it on a whole host of separate days? Why is the coordination so we all pick one day and come out together in a single national day, a weekday of strike action against this government in order to give them a serious warning of what they're up against? And lastly, I come here as well as the acting chair of a body known as the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition. Because after we go away from here today and we go back to our areas, most of us outside of London are going to be facing elections on May the 5th to local authorities, to the Welsh Assembly and the Scottish Parliament. We're going to be faced by and large with the same three main parties who are telling us we have to bear the burden of austerity. We'll either get the vicious cuts put forward from the Tories, the slightly less vicious cuts forward by the Liberal Democrats, our cuts are better than their cuts from the Labour Party, whereas what we want to hear is no cuts in that election. And regretfully, we don't seem to be able to get it. Because when that vote took place in the House of Commons that cut your pensions by changing the index of inflation, the Labour Party abstained. When 2 weeks ago the welfare reform bill went through and housing benefits going to be cut to 80% and disability benefits are to be cut, the Labour Party abstained. When the vote took place 3 or 4 days ago on whether we should be spending millions of pounds bombing again in another war in the Middle East, abstained. No, I think we need something new in politics in this country. In Kidderminster 10 years ago, when they saw their hospital closing, and he was going to get instead a private finance initiative on, and he couldn't get any help from the big three parties, they started one of their own. They called it health concern. It won Dr. Richard Taylor an MP position on 2 general elections, and they won 16 council seats. Up in Barry for this, when 3 comprehensive schools have been closed to be merged and open 1 new academy, and he couldn't get any help from the 3 big parties, they started one of their own, and they got 4 councillors elected in opposition to the privatisation of education. In Wigan, the Community Action Party has councillors. In Walsall, in Wellingborough, and plenty of places that don't begin with W. There are independent councillors now, small examples here and there, who are standing away from the big parties on the basis of an anti-cuts and socialist opposition. The Trade Union Socialist Coalition, supported officially by the RMT and by leading individuals from the PCS, the FBU and other trade unions, intends to support and stand candidates in dozens of towns in the May elections. We want you to work with us in that campaign. But you've only got 9 days, because nominations close at noon on April the 4th. There's plenty of material around here on the stalls. But if we want to take the strategy of fighting the cuts and not leave the month of April devoid of any serious debate, not on how to do the cuts, because that's all they'll get from the big three parties, but on whether there should be any cuts at all, which you'll only get from anti-cuts candidates, you need to join with us in the Trade Unionists and Socialist Coalition, standing candidates in the elections on an anti-cuts, anti-privatisation platform. Thanks very much for your patience with this. Stay along.